this is about advocating for yourself. It's about releasing the restrictions that society puts on you, where society says that you're only cool if you wear this type of shirt, or you wear this type of dress, or if you comb your hair this way, or, this is how your face looks. Facial hair, no facial hair, for women, armpit hair, hair on your legs. All the conditions that society puts on you. Are there any of these conditions that you're ready to let go of? You're like, you know what? I don't care if people don't like me because I have long hair and I'm a man, or I have short hair and I'm a woman, or whatever judgments. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. I love myself. And my choices aren't disrespecting anyone. It might challenge them in some way. But that's what this full moon is about. It's about releasing the judgment and the restrictions that society puts upon you. Welcome to the Weekly Transit, your guide to understanding the current planetary and astral alignments. Together, we'll explore how to harness these cosmic frequencies, empowering you to reach your highest potential as you navigate the days ahead. I'm your host, Scott Tajarian. Welcome to the Weekly Transit. This is the week of August 4th to the 10th, where we will be covering 7 transits, because I forgot a major transit last week. I do make mistakes. I try to be really thorough over everything. At the beginning of the year, I go through every single transit. I put it down in my notes, and I don't know how this one slipped, and it's too big to just overlook, and it's going to be lingering here for quite some time, so I'm going to include it this week, even though I should have included it last week. But so there was going to be 6 transits this week. Now there's going to be 7. They are highlighted by Mars transiting into Libra, the full moon in Aquarius, and the bonus transit, which I forgot last week, Chiron retrograde in Aries. So thank you for your patience in listening in. We will weave this one seamlessly into this week. Let's take a look at this one first. Chiron transiting through Aries, or retrograde, Chiron retrograde in Aries. So this actually occurred the same day that Venus transited into Cancer, which was last Wednesday, July 30th. The synchronicity of this is significant because because Aries, the sign that Chiron's transiting through. And of course, if you're new to the podcast, if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, let me make it as clear as I possibly can to you. Chiron is the wound and the ancient wisdom which is unlocked through healing that wound. Wherever Chiron is indicates where you are experiencing a wound that you feel like you cannot recover from, but it also indicates the ancient wisdom which is unlocked through healing that wound. And so Chiron is transiting through Aries, the cardinal fire sign, symbolized by the ram and ruled by Mars, the god of war. Chiron began its retrograde transit through Aries at 27 degrees on Wednesday, July 30th. The retrograde will end on January 2nd, 2026. Aries is the sign that represents the self. It's your relationship with yourself. And Venus is the planet of relationships. So the fact that Venus transited into Cancer, and Cancer is the cardinal water sign symbolized by the crab and ruled by the moon, the planet of emotions, the planet that represents the past. Our emotions are rooted in our past experiences. So Venus transiting into Cancer is about reflecting upon the origins or the past of our relationships and where our senses, our values, our likes and dislikes stem from. What is it, the seed of what I like or what I don't like? Like, why did I grow up as a 49er fan? That didn't come out of nowhere. My dad was a 49er fan. My godfather was a 49er fanatic. He had an entire room in his house dedicated to 49er memorabilia. So my value of liking the 49ers was rooted in that and wanting to assimilate to the masculine figures in my life. Of course, I'm nowhere near the fan of the 49ers or football in general as I was in the past. It's still somewhat a part of my life. I still do occasionally look at the score of what happened in the 49er game. I might watch a highlight or two, but it's nowhere near what it was like as a child, where I would watch every single game and cry if they lost. So Venus transiting into Cancer is not just about the origins of your relationships, but it's also the origin of your likes and dislikes. And then you've got Chiron in Aries, which is bringing up fears or insecurities that exist within yourself. And the retrograde is more that reflecting. Where does it stem from? Now, Chiron transited into its retrograde shadow on April 5th. Again, an interesting synchronicity is Saturn transited into its retrograde shadow on April 5th. So Saturn and Aries, both Saturn in Pisces and Chiron and Aries both transited into their retrograde shadow on the same day, April 5th of 2025. On January 2nd of next year, Chiron will be exactly where it was on April 5th of 2025. And then on April 25th of 2026, Chiron will be exactly where it was on July 30th, 2025. I bring up these dates because these dates are marker points. The retrograde gives us an opportunity to reflect upon past experiences, recent experiences. So if you can remember, and it's very interesting because, I had an interesting conversation this past week, as I do every week, with Delisa Hawking, the 5th generation psychic, who has been generous enough to invite me onto her platform to go live on YouTube and Facebook every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern over the last several months. The last 2-3 months I've been going on with her every Tuesday. And this last Tuesday, I'll put the link in the show notes in case you missed it, had a very interesting conversation about Chiron transiting retrograde through Aries. I was explaining to Delisa and our live audience that these retrogrades, they give us 3 chances, generally 3 chances to work through a specific issue, let's say. And the issue here is our insecurities, the wound to our self-confidence. And so from April 5th to July 30th was the first pass. From July 30th to January 2nd is the second pass when Chiron is transiting retrograde. And then from January 2nd to April 25th is the third pass. So from April 5th, 2025 to April 25th, 2026, Chiron is transiting across the same degrees in Aries 3 times. From 22 degrees and 35 minutes in Aries to 27 degrees and 9 minutes in Aries. So if you were born with key astrological points or planets at between 22 and 27 degrees in fire signs, which are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, in air signs, which are Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini, or in cardinal signs, 2 of which we've already mentioned, Aries and Libra, and in addition to that, Cancer and Capricorn. If you were born with something between 22 and 26 degrees in those 8 signs, then you are experiencing a direct effect of Chiron in Aries, a wound to self-confidence and security. So, let's say you were born with Venus at 25 degrees in Capricorn. Then you'll experience Chiron squaring your Venus once between April 5th and July 30th, 2025. You'll experience that again between July 30th and January 2nd, 2026. And then you'll experience it a third time between January 2nd and April 25th of 2026. The first time may feel like a shock. It may be intense. It may be like, oh my God, what's happening? The second time, you're like, oh, this again. This has been kind of a theme. And you're a little more prepared for it. And by the third time, if you've been doing the work, the third time it happens, it's like a blip. It's like, I got this. This is the universe helping us to level up, to really ascend to that next level. Now, there is a different circumstance where there was an individual in the chat who was like, oh my God, my birthday is April 5th. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. So I addressed the person in the chat and said, well, that means that on April 5th, 2025, perhaps you experienced some sort of shock on your birthday. Something happened that brought up maybe a wound to insecurity in some way. Now you're going to experience that again in a deeper, more prolonged manner. This individual that I was speaking to, December and January, maybe both those months combined, and then you're done. So like, if that's because that person's sun is at 22 degrees. So if you have something at 22 degrees, then you're going to feel it sharply early April 2025, and then you feel it for an extended period the end of this year and early next year, and then you're done. So because you have one long extended period, you don't have 3, it's not happening to you 3 times. But what was interesting is after I said this, the person put in their chat that in all caps, oh my God, I'm paraphrasing here, my birthday was like the shock of my life. I, came to terms with certain insecurities, and on the next day I told my adult children that their father and I were getting a divorce. Wow. It's so interesting when you share something like this about what the planets can mean, and it's reflected back in such a real and profound way. So look in your astrological code and see what key points or planets are between 22 and 27 degrees in Aries, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Aquarius. If you have any key points or planets at or near to or in between 21 and 27 degrees in those 8 signs, then that's an area where you need to focus on fears, insecurities, and around your self-confidence. I'm curious to hear from you, to see how this information is supporting you. I'm really appreciating all of your reflections. Got a lot of comments this last week, especially on Spotify. Great to hear from everyone, and to know that what we're sharing through the podcast is supporting you and guiding you and empowering you on your journey. That's what I'm here to do. So that was from last week. Let's move to the first official transit of this week, which is Mars in Libra. Mars transits into Libra on Wednesday, August 6th, and will transit through Libra until September 22nd. Mars is the god of war, the planet of action, aggression, conflict, confidence, courage, authenticity. Libra is the cardinal air sign, symbolized by the scales and ruled by Venus, the goddess of love. So Mars is somewhat out of place here in Libra, because the god of war in the sign that's ruled by the goddess of love. It's in a sign that opposes the sign that Mars rules, Aries. When Mars transits through Libra, there's going to be conflicts in relationships. We are resetting the scales, and in resetting the scales, there may be challenges to do so. There may be more aggression towards creating balance, where one side does not want the change to occur. The other side is determined because there feels to be an imbalance, but the other side disagrees. On the other hand, there may be more courage in creating diplomacy, in moving towards diplomacy instead of physical or verbal conflict. Perhaps you'll be more graceful as you approach conflict, but it might go sharply the other direction, where grace, harmony, and fairness is disrupted by aggression. Regardless of what occurs, where you're being directed is to be courageous in creating balance, being courageous in choosing diplomacy, but at the same time, not backing down if it does not feel fair. Libra can be very combative. There's kind of this misnomer, and I shouldn't say it's a misnomer because it's true that Libra is very peaceful, Libra is very calm, Libra wants balance and peace and harmony. But if Libra feels like something is unfair, then Libra will be extremely aggressive. There's an example of that occurred in sports this last week, where Bryce Harper, who is a baseball player for the Philadelphia Phillies, he is one of the faces of baseball. You can put him up there with Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani. I think Bryce Harper's won the MVP at least twice. Mike Trout's another big name in the game, but Bryce Harper is a Libra. And apparently the commissioner of baseball, Rob Manfred, came into the Phillies, the Philadelphia Phillies. That's the team that Bryce Harper plays for. And mind you, Bryce Harper is one of the highest paid players in baseball. But Rob Manfred came in to the Phillies locker room, reportedly, and broached the issue of, players eventually needing to concede to the owners and agreeing to a salary cap. Basketball has a salary cap, the NBA and the NFL has a salary cap. Baseball, of the three major sports, North American sports, is the only one that has no salary cap. And so the teams, they pay whatever they can. If you're a team like Tampa Bay, they have a payroll that's very small. Whereas if you're a team like the New York Yankees or the LA Dodgers, your payroll is enormous. And, there's arguments on both sides. I don't really want to get into it, but Bryce Harper obviously did not feel like that was a fair topic to broach, and it was reported that he told the commissioner of baseball to get the bleep out of their clubhouse, which seems very extreme. But when those scales are tilted in a direction that feels extreme, Libra will be extreme in response. And, when you're a player, even if you're someone like Bryce Harper who's making what some people would think is an insane amount of money, it's nothing compared to what these teams are worth. You don't ever see these sports teams being purchased by, they're not even purchased by people anymore. They're purchased by private equity groups, that have war chests in excess of billions of dollars. And when they buy these teams and then sell these teams, they don't sell them at a loss. And so to think that the players would need to subjugate themselves to the owners, I could see why Bryce Harper would be quite offended by that subject and reacted in a way that seems unreasonable or unfair or ungraceful. But that's what happens when Libra feels like they're being pushed in a way that's unfair. And that's some of what we might experience here with Mars in Libra, where one side is aggressively trying to take from the other side and the other side is reacting in an equal or even more aggressive manner. I've got a essay that I'm going to read about this later on in the episode. I've gotten a lot of positive comments from the writing that I've been doing recently, sharing the historical implications of some of these transits. Last week we talked about Venus in Cancer and how it hasn't aligned with Saturn and Neptune in Aries at the same time since August of 1379. Well, Mars in Libra is going to be making some of those aspects that are like mind-blowing. How many times this has happened? Not a lot in the last 2,000 years, and it's happening again right now, and what that means. But for you, I'd like you to think about these dates, because These are the last 4 times that Mars transited through Libra. August 27th to October 11th, 2023. September 14th to October 30th, 2021. October 3rd to November 18th, 2019. October 22nd to December 9th, 2017. So think back to these dates for clues on what could be in store for you this time around as Mars transits through Libra. Look back at your emails, your text messages, your social media posts, the photographs in your phone, and see if any of these dates pop up, what was going on with you during that time. It might give you a clue on what you might experience, a different version of what you might experience this time around. Of course, if you were born with any key astrological points or planets in Cancer or Capricorn, there is conflict headed your way. That doesn't mean something bad is going to happen. What it means is tension is coming up, and you need to pay attention to the tension. So if you were born with Venus in Cancer or Venus in Capricorn, prepare for conflicts in your relationship. That doesn't mean you're breaking up, but it means that something is coming to the surface that needs to be addressed. Something is coming to the surface that needs to be addressed. There is tension. There's something festering that needs to come to the surface so that it can be cleared. Everyone who was born between 2008 and 2023 is going to experience Mars squaring their Pluto. So this is mostly children. So any parents out there, if you have children, be mindful of when Mars is squaring their Pluto. There might be some temper tantrums or anger or rage that comes up when the god of war, Mars, squares their god of death, Pluto. And they might be pushing back on you over the authority you wield over them because they were born with Pluto in Capricorn, so they have a very strong transformative will when it comes to authority. And maybe they're feeling like there is some sort of imbalance with their relationship with you, and this may be a time where they're trying to push back and test the boundaries. Of course, if you are curious to learn how this Mars transit through Libra is affecting you directly and how you can work with the energy mindfully from a place of awareness to support yourself through this transit from August 6th to September 22nd, then I encourage you to reach out to me for a reading at theweeklytransit.com. The second transit of the week, Mars in Libra, forms an opposition to Saturn retrograde in Aries at 1 degree. At the same time, Mars in Libra forms a trine with Uranus in Gemini at 1 degree. This transit is occurring from Wednesday to Sunday, with the exact opposition between Mars and Saturn and the exact trine between Mars and Uranus occurs on Friday, August 8th. This is powerful. And I went back and looked over the last 2,000 years and I couldn't find another time that this has happened. So I wasn't going to go back into the BCs. But what does this mean for right now? So Saturn is the god of wealth and time. It's the planet of restriction, responsibility, hard work, achievement, authority. Uranus is the primordial sky god, the planet of revolution, rebellion, innovation, independence, the unexpected. Gemini is the mutable air sign, symbolized by the twins and ruled by Mercury, the planet of communication. There's an interesting relationship between Uranus and Saturn. When you think of the myths, in the Greek myths, that's where Uranus comes from. But Saturn in the Greek myths is known as Kronos. And Kronos is the son of Uranus. Uranus is the son and lover to Gaia, Mother Earth. And, as one could imagine, fathering children with your mother might screw somebody's mind up. And I guess that's what happened to Uranus, where he killed off all of his offspring with Gaia because he wanted her all to himself and was jealous of the offspring. So she hid Kronos away because she was afraid that Uranus was going to kill him. And as Kronos grew and aged and became stronger, he eventually confronted Uranus and castrated his father, throwing the family jewels into the ocean, and out bubbled up Aphrodite, aka Venus in the Roman tradition. So Mars, transiting through the sign that is ruled by Venus, Libra, forms an opposition to Saturn in Aries and a trine to Uranus in Gemini. Again, this occurs from Wednesday to Sunday, with the exact alignments occurring on Friday, which is named for Frigg, which is the Old Norse version of Venus or Aphrodite. That's what Friday is, the day of Venus, Viernes for my Spanish-speaking friends, Venus. So, what does this mean? The tension exists between what you want, what you're willing to take responsibility for, and the balance that's going to bring about peace between yourself and those that you're in relationship with. The tension is between Mars action and Saturn restriction. Maybe somebody is coming to you because they feel that you owe them something, and you are creating that sense of restriction that you don't. You're being called to take responsibility for your self-love, to take responsibility for yourself. Your responsibility is to love yourself. And so maybe the tension is because you're taking responsibility to love yourself, the call may be for you to be more courageous in going after what you feel you deserve. The connection to Uranus in Gemini is urging you to see things from a different perspective. Maybe that different perspective is going to help you realize that there is something more that you can offer to the one who is asking something from you. Or maybe the different perspective is helping you see things from the other side, which gives you insight into how you can be more diplomatic in asking or demanding what you feel you deserve. So even though there's tension between Mars and Saturn, there's fluidity between Uranus and Mars. But the fluidity comes from doing things radically different than you've done in the past. So if you find yourself falling into old habits with regards to relationships, you may be headed down the wrong path. The path that you want to head down is one that is unfamiliar, that is unique to where you've been before. So it's taking the unique path in your relationships, communicating differently than you had in the past, that is going to help you get what you desire. The fourth transit of the week is the full moon in Aquarius, which is occurring at 16 degrees at 12:54 a.m. on Saturday, August 9th. And that's 12:54 a.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time. So if you're on the East Coast, it's 3:54 a.m. It's the middle of the night, early morning on Saturday, August 9th. The full moon is a release. It's the exhale. Aquarius is the fixed air sign, symbolized by the water bear and ruled by Saturn and Uranus. So we were just talking about Mars in Libra aligning with Saturn and Uranus. And at the same time as these aspects are occurring, the full moon is occurring in the sign that is ruled by Saturn and Uranus. You see the synchronicities here? This is why I love astrology. It feels so clockwork. Nothing is random. It's all in harmony together. So how, in a literal sense, does this play into the previous two transits? Well, Aquarius is about detaching. It's about being logical. It's about thinking beyond yourself and thinking about the impact that you make on those around you within your community, within society, within the world, within any group that you are a part of. Me talking on this podcast is Aquarius. Like everyone who's listening here is a part of this community of the weekly transit. Or like when I'm with Delisa, it's a part of her community. You have all these different people that are showing up every week and commenting. And it feels like a community. So what is the impact that you're making upon your community? But the full moon is the release. In what ways is the community holding you back? Because the inhale, the new moon, the full moon is the exhale, the new moon is the inhale. And so we got to go back 2 weeks to the inhale, which was the new moon in Leo. And that new moon in Leo was aligning with Saturn in Aries, Neptune in Aries, Uranus in Gemini, and Pluto in Aquarius. We're going to talk about Neptune and Pluto in a minute because that's also aligning with Mars. So that was a very special new moon aligning with these 4 outer planets, which the new moon has only done 4 times in the last 250 years. And it wasn't in these signs. So that new moon was about setting your intentions to open your heart, to love yourself, to create from a place of self-love, to take responsibility for what it means to love yourself. And someone I did an interview with on the podcast earlier, Mark Erickson, who's a very interesting individual. He's the CEO of the company he founded, and he's also an incredibly talented singer-songwriter. And he did a post on Instagram recently where I'm paraphrasing, but it said something that he understands that it's his responsibility to love himself more than anyone else can and to enjoy the journey along the way. And that so speaks to what the new moon in Leo was about. And so when you think about that's the inhale and then the exhale is the full moon in Aquarius, it's like Do I need the approval of the community to do what I want to do? I mean, as long as whatever it is you're doing is not in disrespect to others, it's not hateful or harmful to others, then, this is this full moon is about releasing the need to be accepted. I don't need everyone to accept me. There's 8 billion people on planet Earth. How are they all going to like me? It's impossible for them to all know me. So this is doubling down on following your heart and finding your joy. And so when you think about it, in collaboration with Mars opposing Saturn in Aries and forming a trine to Uranus in Gemini, this is about advocating for yourself. It's about releasing the restrictions that society puts on you, where society says that you're only cool if you wear this type of shirt, or you wear this type of dress, or if you comb your hair this way, or this is how your face looks. Facial hair, no facial hair. For women, armpit hair, hair on your legs. All the conditions that society puts on you. Are there any of these conditions that you're ready to let go of? You're like, you know what? I don't care if people don't like me because I have long hair and I'm a man, or I have short hair and I'm a woman, or whatever judgments. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. I love myself. And my choices aren't disrespecting anyone. It might challenge them in some way. But that's what this full moon is about. It's about releasing the judgment and the restrictions that society puts upon you. It's about having the courage to follow your heart and follow your joy, to honor your sense of joy, your sense of laughter and playfulness and creativity. And of course, if you're curious to learn how the next lunar cycle is going to be affecting you and what you can do to work with the energy to your benefit, then I encourage you to enroll in my moon cycle classes at theweeklytransit.com. Continuing with the 5th and 6th transits, which happen, it's so interesting. It's like you've got the 3rd and 4th transits, which is Mars opposing Saturn, trine Uranus, and then the full moon. And then the last 2 transits are Mars opposing Neptune and trine Pluto. So we're going to continue talking about the full moon through the end of the episode, and what these transits of Mars, what they're continuing to do. The reason why I didn't lump all 4 of these Mars transits together is because Mars in Libra opposing Neptune retrograde in Aries occurs from Wednesday to Monday, with the exact opposition occurring on Saturday, August 9th. Whereas the 2 previous transits of Mars, Saturn, and Uranus, the exact alignments are on Friday, August 8th. And then Mars in Libra forms a trine, a supportive aspect to Pluto retrograde in Aquarius, from Thursday to Tuesday, with the exact trine occurring on Sunday, August 10th. So Neptune is the god of fresh water and the sea, the planet of illusion, deception, compassion, intuition. It's retrograde in Aries at 1 degree. Pluto is the god of death, lord of the underworld, the planet of transformation. It's retrograde in Aquarius at 2 degrees. So these are the 4 outer planets that were all aligning with the new moon in Leo. And now they're all aligning with Mars in Libra right around the full moon in Aquarius. So Mars in Libra opposing Neptune in Aries is bringing about maybe a sense of confusion in terms of, I know things aren't fair in my relationship, but honestly, I don't even know what I want. I don't know what I want to make them fair. I don't know what I would need to feel like they're fair. I'm really confused about why I don't know what I want. Or maybe I do know what I want, but I don't know how to get it. Maybe I'm confused by my partner. Maybe I'm confused by myself within my relationship. I don't know who I am in this relationship. There's really an urge here to slow down. Whenever Mars gets involved with Neptune, like pump the brakes. Pump the brakes. I mean, this is definitely not a time to be making major decisions around relationships, especially with Mercury retrograde during this period. You just kind of want to sit in the fog and meditate, figure it out. And during the full moon, release the burdens. Release the expectations, because the expectations that society is putting on you may be something you're putting on yourself. Society or the group might be like, we don't really care what you do. You're the one that cares and thinks that we care, but we don't care. So maybe some of these restrictions that you think society is putting upon you are really restrictions that you put upon yourself. Mars in Libra forming a trine to Pluto retrograde in Aquarius. This is about having the courage to engage in the community and being willing to transform. Be willing to be different. Be willing to see society as different. So as we release the burdens that we feel society has put upon us, and we realize that maybe some of those burdens were actually self-imposed and it has nothing to do with society, maybe our whole perspective of society changes. Maybe our whole perspective of the group changes. Do you have the courage to reimagine the dream of what relationship might mean for you? If you're confused about who you are in your relationship, then these transits are supporting you in moving towards finding greater clarity. You've got Uranus in Gemini, which is mutable air. You've got Mars in Libra, which is cardinal air. You've got Pluto retrograde in Aquarius, which is fixed air. It's a lot of air. Sound travels through the air. The air signs are the communicative signs. So this week, the theme this week centers around listening, communicating, sharing ideas, opening up the conversation. Maybe the conversations contribute to the confusion. Maybe they bring clarity. Either way, we're moving things forward, but we're doing so at a pace that is hopefully manageable. Air can be quick, but with Mercury retrograde and Mars opposing Neptune, we want to slow down. We don't want to rush through the conversation. We want to have the conversation, but we need to take our time and really process what's being said. Slow down and process what is being said. Initiate the conversation and slow down. Allow somebody, hey, can you repeat that again? I think you said this, but can you say that again? really make sure you're receiving what is being shared with you. Because that's what I imagine you would want anyone that you're sharing anything with to feel about you. Though some people might get offended. You weren't listening to me. Okay, well, you're right. I wasn't. And that's why I asked you to repeat yourself. Or I was listening. This is what I heard you say, but I wasn't really sure if that's what you meant. These are just some examples of how we can communicate with each other in a way that's peaceful. And through the conversation and the listening, we find the balance. So it comes with an open heart. Open your heart, release the burdens that you've put upon yourself or that have been put upon you. Detach from these burdens. Acknowledge where you're feeling confused. Ask questions. Show up radically different in your thought process. Be willing to see things from an entirely different perspective. And through that, you will find balance, peace, and harmony, hopefully, this week. Now, to conclude, I wanted to go a little bit deeper on Mars and this transit between the opposition with Saturn and Neptune and Aries. I couldn't find another instant in the last 2,000 years where Mars and Libra opposed Saturn and Neptune and Aries, formed a trine with Uranus and Gemini and Pluto and Aquarius. So this is extremely special. But I did find 3 other instances, in addition to this one, where Mars in Libra was opposite Saturn and Neptune in Aries around the same time. This is the diplomat confronting the warlords. Mars, the god of war and action, enters Libra this week, where it will transit from August 6th to September 22nd. Libra is the sign of peace, justice, and relational equilibrium. But Mars is not home here. This is exile, an energy of conflict navigating the halls of harmony, a warrior asked to wield strategy instead of brute force. And this time, diplomacy won't come easy. Why? Because the moment Mars steps into Libra, this planetary force locks eyes across the zodiac with 2 celestial giants, Saturn and Neptune, both transiting Aries, the sign of will, war, and raw beginnings, ruled by Mars itself. These are not casual oppositions, they are confrontations with the very foundation of identity, power, and illusion. Saturn in Aries says, "You must build yourself." Neptune in Aries whispers, "But do you even know who you are?" Mars, moving through Libra's domain of justice and perspective, must reconcile these opposing forces. Structure versus soul, force versus vision, righteousness versus reality. This is not just an ideological standoff. It is a spiritual confrontation. Just last week, we witnessed Venus in Cancer, the goddess of love and devotion, square Saturn and Neptune in Aries, igniting emotional tension between safety and sovereignty, fantasy and form. Now it's Mars, the energy of action and assertion that steps into the arena, confronting the same planetary forces from the opposite side of the zodiac. Where Venus asked us to feel what is true, Mars demands we act on it. The conversation between Cancer and Aries has become a confrontation between Libra and Aries, between the desire to negotiate and the pressure to dominate, between the call for harmony and the demand for individuation. The outer planets remain the same, but the tone has shifted. The energy has escalated. Though there have been other instances where Mars in Libra has opposed Saturn in Aries, and other times when Mars in Libra has opposed Neptune in Aries, the only 3 times that Mars in Libra has opposed both Saturn and Aries at or near the same time in the last 2,000 years, and none of those alignments were as exact as the one unfolding now, were in November 1703, September 554 AD, and July of 231 AD. So what does history reveal about moments like these? 1703, collapse of structures, rise of spiritual authority. In November 1703, England was struck by the Great Storm, the most violent in its recorded history, killing thousands. Clergy across the nation called it an act of divine wrath. Nature itself was seen as rebuking the arrogance of empire. Saturn and Neptune, loosely conjoined in Aries, sent a message. The world cannot be tamed. That same time, Europe was deep in the War of Spanish Succession, a battle not just for territory, but for legitimacy. Who has the right to rule? Who sets the terms of the future? These were Mars and Libra questions, questions of treaties, lines drawn, alliances made and broken. Sound familiar? Today we are at it again, caught in a storm, both literal and metaphorical. Climate disasters accelerate, empires fray, truth bends, and Mars in Libra returns to ask, can we make peace before we destroy each other? 554 AD, theocracy, reconquest, and divine justice. The Byzantine Empire under Emperor Justinian I had just won a key battle in Italy, reclaiming lost territory from the crumbling Western Roman Empire. But this was no ordinary conquest. It was justified as a divine mission. Justinian saw himself as God's representative on earth, with the law, Saturn, and the cross, Neptune, as his weapons. This was also the year he passed the pragmatic sanction of 554, reorganizing Italy and codifying Roman law under a Christian lens. Mars in Libra represented the pen as much as the sword, using diplomacy, decree, and legal power to assert control. In 2025, we find ourselves in a similar pattern. Spiritual and legal structures are merging again, from AI-enforced morality to biotech ethics to battles over reproductive rights. Neptune in Aries clouds the ego with divine delusions. Saturn in Aries sets the rules of conquest. Mars in Libra asks, where is justice in this story? And whose version of the truth is being written into law? 231 AD. The fall of empire begins. Emperor Severus Alexander ruled a crumbling Rome, criticized for being too gentle, too peace-seeking. He tried to negotiate with enemies rather than fight. Mars in Libra once again showed its face. Diplomacy over domination. But in a world that worshipped might, it looked like weakness. His reign marked the beginning of the crisis of the 3rd century, a period of economic collapse, plague, invasions, and civil war. Rome's golden mask began to crack. Neptune dissolved identity. Saturn demanded sacrifice. Mars held the center, trying to bring equilibrium to chaos. And now in 2025, the same questions arise again. Is compromise weakness or wisdom? Can diplomacy survive when the war gods demand action? What structures must fall for something real to rise? Tracing the thread. Mars in Libra from 2017 to 2023. Mars enters Libra every 2 years, but this time the stakes are higher. As the god of war opposes Saturn and Neptune in exact alignment, a larger arc begins to crest. This is the ignition point of a storyline that has been quietly building over the last 4 cycles. Let's look back. October 22nd to December 9th, 2017. The hashtag #MeToo movement erupted. Harvey Weinstein's exposure cracked open decades of silence. Mars in Libra demanded justice in the dominance of power and relationships. The collective began to recalibrate the meaning of fairness and accountability. Now in 2025, those themes have matured. How do we restore balance without replicating harm? What does right relationship look like in a world still waking from the illusions of patriarchal dominance? October 3rd to November 18th, 2019. Global protests erupted from Hong Kong to Santiago, from Beirut to Barcelona. People rose to demand dignity, equality, and reform. Mars in Libra carried the banner of social justice, activating collective action through civil channels, not armed revolt. Now in 2025, resistance looks different. Voices are splintered, narratives conflict. Mars returns asking, what does unity look like when everyone believes they're fighting for peace? September 14th to October 30th, 2021. The world grappled with debates over fairness, freedom, and authority. Vaccine mandates, political polarization, and systematic reform filled the air. Mars in Libra stirred conversations not through violence, but through courts, protests, and policy shifts. Now in 2025, we revisit the deeper question. What does long-term justice require? And how do we pursue it without sacrificing connection? August 27th to October 11th, 2023, conflict surged once again. Hamas kidnapped Israeli civilians, reigniting another devastating cycle of violence in the Middle East. Tensions rose globally. Mars in Libra sought balance, but found a world too volatile to meet it. Now in 2025, with Mars opposing Saturn and Neptune directly, we are being asked to reckon with what happens when diplomacy fails, and to imagine a new path towards peace. A threshold of choice. This week, Mars in Libra stands opposite Saturn and Neptune in Aries, the god of structure and the god of illusion. Not through force, but through reflection. Not with conquest, but with discernment. This is not about retreat. It is about right use of power. This is not about silence. It is about sacred speech. This is not about winning. It is about weighing. Just as in 1703, just as in 554, just as in 231, we are at a turning point. What does this mean for you? This week may stir conflict in relationships, law, or leadership. You may feel the urge to fight or flee, or to freeze in the face of contradiction. But pause, breathe, reflect. Ask yourself, where am I being called to assert my truth, but with grace? What structures of justice have I relied on that no longer serve? Where am I projecting illusion into conflict rather than seeking clarity? This is your invitation to wield your sword with discernment, to fight not for dominance, but for balance, to honor the warrior within, not by striking first, but by listening, aligning, and standing clear. You are not here to reenact old wars. You are here to restore right relationship. Mars is watching. So is the world. I hope this is helpful to you. If you're still listening, please like or subscribe wherever you're listening. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, your reflections. And as always, it is an honor and a privilege to share this information with you. Thank you for being here, and I'll look forward to reconnecting with you next week. Thank you for listening to the weekly transit. If you're curious to learn how these transits or any other transits may be affecting you, or if you're interested in learning more about your astrological code, contact me for a reading at theweeklytransit.com. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog-Lyman. Wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.